To head up today's random stuff video, I want to talk about another popular misconception. Last time it was bay leaves, this time it's why are these switches in the on position when there's nothing plugged in? This is a point of confusion, concern and consternation for quite a lot of people apparently. The UK 3-pin mains plugs and sockets are designed with a lot of safety features. Many people argued that they're over-designed for safety, and we'll look at some of the design specifications in a moment, but that's not really the main discussion. The question is, why are these left switched on, and shouldn't I switch them off when not in use? To answer that, the first thing we need to realise is that, although these sockets have a lot of safety features, the switches are not amongst them. The switch is not a safety feature, or at least not in the way you may have assumed. The specification for UK mains plugs and sockets, plus a few other things, is laid out in a publication from the British Standards Institute, BS 1363. It's a very detailed specification that's in several parts. Part 2 of 5 is all about the sockets, and it's 90 pages long. When I say this document is very detailed, I'm not exaggerating. It specifies what the sockets are supposed to be for, their purpose. It states the expected ambient temperature range and altitude and atmospheric conditions that they must be suitable for. It states which way up they should be, the heat and fire and mechanical wear and chemical resistance the material should have. It details the exact dimensions and spacing and shapes of all of the parts, including things like the minimum distance between the pin and the edge of the plug, the markings they should have, for example the manufacturer and the version of the standard they comply with, but also whether or not they're fused and what current they're rated for. The document specifies how secure the wiring attachments must be, the fit and clearances of all of the dimensions and parts. It talks a lot about how all the things that it specifies may be tested, including how to construct and calibrate the test equipment. For example, some of the tests involve trying to break or deform the products by pushing a hardwood block against them. The dimensions and material properties of the hardwood block are fully described and diagrammed. And much of this whole document is about safety. Features like sheath pins on the plug, making it physically impossible to touch an exposed conductor when the plug is pulled partly out of the socket. Or perhaps the most famous feature of the socket, the shutters that close off the live and neutral socket and only open when the earth pin, which is longer, engages with the mechanism first as the plug is inserted. So yeah, there is a lot of safety stuff in it, and I'm not going to say that they've thought of everything, but they have certainly tried to think of everything. And the reason for mentioning this is that the one thing the publication doesn't say anything about is the use case for the switches. It provides specifications on how they must be safely made, but it doesn't say what they're for. And the reason for this is the switches are not a safety feature of the socket. Now you might think I'm just assuming that based on an absence of evidence to the contrary in this document, but there's an even simpler way to know that these switches are not a safety feature, and it's this. All of the safety features in BS 1363 are mandatory. If you want to manufacture or install mains plugs and sockets in any professional capacity, you can't opt out of implementing any of the safety features. It uses the word shall a lot, not should. But the switches are optional. It has some things, quite a few things to say about how good the switches must be if they are fitted, but their inclusion at all is optional. In fact, hiding in plain sight up to now has been the fact that the title of the document includes switched and unswitched sockets. If the switch was a safety component, there would not be able to be any unswitched sockets, and yet there are. Here's a retail listing for unswitched socket faceplates. So one of these unswitched sockets is functionally identical in safety to a switched socket where the switch is continually in the on position. They're equally safe. But that still doesn't answer the question about why mine are left in the on position. Wouldn't it just be better in some way if I did turn them off when not in use? And anyway, what are they for then? Taking those questions in reverse order, the switches are a convenience feature. For example, if you have an appliance that doesn't have its own on-off switch, the switch on the socket can be used to turn it completely off. The examples of this sort of use are not hugely abundant, but one I can think of is appliances that have a standby light on them, such as my food mixer. That light by the dial stays on all the time the thing is plugged in. Some people might be concerned about its power drain over long periods. Other people, me included, might be just annoyed that it's always on. The switch on the socket makes it go off without the ever so slightly greater inconvenience of unplugging it. And the switches make basic safety more convenient too. For example, if a bit of toast gets stuck in the toaster and I need to poke something in there to get it out, or if something gets wrapped around the blade of a blender that doesn't have any safety interlock, it's ever so slightly more convenient to switch off the appliance at the wall than it is to unplug it, to prevent injury. So a safety feature, but it's more about the convenience of making something safe. But wouldn't it be better if I just switched them off anyway? Well, no, not really. The safety is all there regardless. There are no exposed conductors in an unpopulated UK mains socket, and it's not like the electricity is just going to drip out of the holes with the switch left on. These aren't poison sockets. The sheathing on the pins and the plug make the action of plugging and unplugging things very safe, so it doesn't matter if the socket is switched on. If I switched these off when they weren't in use, it would be ever so slightly less convenient when plugging things in. It's just an additional unnecessary couple of operations to switch on a thing after plugging it in and switch it off before unplugging. Not that I go around looking for that kind of optimization in my life, but rather the switches are on because there's just no good reason to switch them off most of the time, so I don't. It wouldn't even be a thing I would have thought about as much as I have done here if it wasn't for all the concerned noises. I've got a load of apples that must be used up. These have been just languishing in the fruit bowl for ages. These were Granny Smiths, and they've now ripened to the point where they're a little bit soft and they've gone yellow. They're still fine, but you probably wouldn't want to eat that as a dessert apple. However, we can cook with them. Well, except for that one, which went bad. I'm going to make an apple crumble, but I've got an interesting leftover to put in there apart from apples. So yeah, I think these apples would just be a bit soft and kind of woolly if they were eaten out of hand. But cooked in an apple crumble, they'll be fine because, in fact, they'll be sweeter for this extra period of sitting there ripening. You probably won't need as much additional sugar to counteract the normal acidity that you'd get from cooked apple, because some of that acidity has just subsided. I'm gonna just chop them up into chunks, and those will go in this dish. Now, to prevent those going brown, you could put lemon juice on there, but I'm going to use the juice of a clementine, tangerine, because it will go very nicely with something else I'm thinking about. Every time I use this on a video, people ask me about it. All I know is it's called Simplex. I think it's Italian citrus juicer. I bought it second-hand in a charity shop. So yeah, when I put bits of apple in there, I will just toss them around in that clementine juice. Back in a moment, when all those apples are peeled. That's all of my apples cut up and then dressed in that clementine juice. It became clear in this process that I'm going to need a bigger bowl. That'll do it. But we're not done. There is one more important ingredient, which is the whole point of recording this little bit of video, which is Christmas pudding. Why am I bringing out a Christmas pudding in April? This bit of video was recorded in April, by the way. We bought an extra Christmas pudding in case we had guests at Christmas, and that just didn't come about. And we had this extra Christmas pudding sitting there on the side. And we kept on saying to each other, we ought to eat that Christmas pudding. The best before date on it wouldn't have taken it to next year, although, to be honest, it probably would have been fine kept that long. But anyway, the other day we did actually get around to eating half of it. And the other half I have here. So that's Christmas pudding. And I'm going to put that in my apple crumble. Because from experience, I can tell you that is a superb combination. So Christmas pudding, it's like a very dark, spiced fruit cake. I'm just going to chop that up into chunks like that and mix it in with my apple. Now we are getting full again here, but this dish, the apple will cook down. So make sure that's fairly evenly distributed through the apple like that. So if you don't have Christmas pudding, I suppose you could use a chunk of rich fruit cake, or you could just use some raisins and spices and other bits and pieces. But this is a really good way of using up leftover bits of Christmas pudding, if there is such a thing as leftover Christmas pudding in your house. I appreciate this is not particularly seasonal advice, but perhaps just file that away in your head. So we'll have a bit of sugar, That's about a tablespoon and a half in with the apples. I don't think they'll need any more than that because they are very ripe apples, so they're very sweet. Just to help that along, ground mixed spice. That's a blend of cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg and probably coriander seed. Just have a little bit of that in there as well, just to help that Christmas pudding along, because there's not very much of it compared to the amount of apple. Right, we've got to make a topping. And for the topping, I've got 75 grams of, I'm using a vegetable baking fat. You could use butter. I'm making this with this because it may be served to somebody with dairy intolerance. 75 grams of plain wholemeal flour, or a little bit over actually, just because I got carried away. And we're going to rub those two things together, which you could do just by using your fingertips, but I'm going to use a pastry rubbing in tool. That's quite a lot of fat for that amount of flour actually, but we're not done. They don't need to be thoroughly combined, just raggedly mixed like that. Next, oats. I think it'll be about 50 grams probably. And this is going to need some sugar. I think that's going to be about 50 grams as well. Random little tip. Instead of those plastic bag closing clips you can buy, I just use these. These are stationary. Well, actually, now it's stationary. No, I buy these from the stationery store. They are bulldog clips or document clips or whatever. They work really well. They keep the bag closed tighter than plastic ones do. They're oven proof as well, so if you need to make like a paper envelope for baking fish or steaming fish, these can go through the oven. There's no plastic parts. They're all metal. And also, they're good because they don't go brittle in the freezer like plastic ones would. Anyway, that's the crumble topping. And there it is on top. And just push that to the sides. It's not a very thick crumble topping, so the apples are peeping through a little bit. That's now going to go in the oven, 180 degrees Celsius fan, for probably half an hour, something like that, until we'll see it sink because the apples will cook down and some of them will bubble up through the crust and this will go golden brown. Back in a minute when that's done. Okay, now I might have overcooked this. The top didn't go as brown as I expected, and so I left it in the oven for an extra 15 minutes. And well, let's have a look anyway. No, I think it's okay. So, yeah, we've got lovely, still visible chunks of apple, sort of sitting in a sauce made from their own juice, plus that clementine juice. And the Christmas pudding's kind of dissolved, which is what I hoped and expected would happen. I was going to serve this with a bit of creme fraiche. I'll go and give Jenny hers, and then I'll come back and taste mine. So yeah, the chunks of apple are still in there. The Christmas pudding's just broken apart, which is what I wanted. Tasting time. It's so good. It tastes like a lot of effort went into it. Just because that Christmas pudding has so much to bring to the dish. I appreciate that's not a very seasonal idea, but file that away in your brain in case you have some leftover Christmas pudding, you know, when it is in season. Now, I like a breakfast muffin. So I'm talking about a couple of sausage patties fried with an egg and some cheese in a muffin, such as you might find at McDonald's. Actually, I don't very often buy one from McDonald's anymore, although that probably is my favourite thing on their menu if I'm there in time for it. But I quite often make something similar at home with probably better sausages, nicer eggs, and certainly better cheese. But on Easter Sunday, I had an idea. What happens if you use a hot cross bun instead of the muffin? In the prevailing theme of this channel, we're going to stop wondering and find out, and we'll see what that's like. So I've got some nice sausages, 85% pork. These have already got quite a bit of sage and pepper in them, but I will be adding some more sage, some ground black pepper, and some hot chili flakes. So first we'll get this sausage out of its skin. This is sometimes a better way to buy sausage meat. You know, you can buy sausage meat without skins, but there's more variety available if you just buy sausages. So extra things are going to go in there, and then I suspect I might end up just getting my hands in there at some point. Well, I certainly will, because I've got to shape these into patties, but let's get the ingredients just distributed in there with a fork. Anyway, there we go. That's pretty well mixed. I'm going to shape that into patties and get it in a frying pan. And then I'm going to divide my sausage meat roughly in half. This is going to make some nice big generous patties, but that's not a bad thing. They will shrink a little bit when they're fried. I'm going to get these in the pan before it starts to sizzle, because I'm going to sit them on top of that oil. So just a bit of oil. So yeah, just gently sizzling. We will cook those on a medium heat because I want them to be nicely cooked through. I want to render some fat out of here because we've also got to cook an egg. Meanwhile, a hot cross bun. If you're not familiar with hot cross buns, this is a sweet, spiced bread bun made with an enriched dough, filled with dried fruit, raisins, currants, marked with a cross of plain dough on the top. It's an Easter thing. Traditionally only eaten on Easter Sunday. It's a few days after Easter Sunday, and I've got this one left over. That's going to be my bun for this sandwich, but I'm going to toast it. Sausages are not far off done, so it's time to get the egg in there. I'm just going to brush the inside of this pochette ring with some oil, some of the fat out of the pan, just really to stop that from sticking. Need a bit longer on that side, I think. I'm going to cook them that way up. It's the underside that needs the last bit of frying. Just cheddar cheese, thinly sliced. My bun, fresh out the toaster. A little bit of butter on that just to help that along. And as soon as that cheese is melted on top of my sausage patties, they're going to go onto a separate plate to rest while the egg just finishes cooking. Butter's now had a chance to just melt, and we're very nearly ready to assemble my sausage patties with cheese. It's going to be quite a stack. Egg. I think we have managed to achieve a runny yolk here. So there we go. That is my breakfast hot cross bun. What would you call this if it was in McDonald's? The Easter. We're going to find that yolk goes boom when I take a bite. In fact, I've really overloaded this, but here goes. I might have to edit this next bit out. It's too much. In more ways than one. For one thing, I've just made my sausage patties way too thick and big. And there's too much in here. It's too big. It's also too many flavours. It's not horrible, but the hot cross bun sweetness and fruit and spices and the spices and flavours of the sausages, they're not exactly combining. It's just too many good things. Yeah, as a flavour combination, it's just a bit chaotic. And, well, I had to try it, and it's not so bad that I won't eat it, but it's probably one of these cases where less is more. So just a muffin allows the flavours of the sausage and everything else to just shine a bit. Anyway, curious itch scratched. I'm going to turn the camera off now and clear up this mess. In my rice puddings video, I measured out the rice by weight for a couple of reasons. One is that that's just how recipes tend to work where I live. But also, it seemed like that's probably a more reliable way of getting a consistent amount of rice. I figured the absorption of liquid into the rice was probably more correlated with the weight of the rice than the volume, although there will be variations. But there is a question about the kind of bulk density of these rices, which we'll try to investigate. So we're going to weigh a set volume of each of these types of rice. Doing this in a measuring cylinder might not be the best possible vessel because the size of the grains and the size and shape of the container will make a difference, but I think this is the best we can do. I don't want to pack it down, that's the point. I want to just pour it in. So we will begin. So zeroed the scales. Actually, I'll need to do that again once I've got the funnel in there. Zeroed the scales, and first off we're going to have long grain. So just the cheap long grain. And already it's jammed in the funnel. So I'm going to try and fill to as close as I can to the 100 ml mark. So not that much. Okay, that looks level to me. So that is 56.4 grams for 100 ml of cheap long grain. Now I've got to get that back in the packet. Could do with a funnel with a slightly wider spout, but I don't have one. I've got jam funnels, which obviously would be too wide. Okay, and then we just repeat for the other kinds of rice. Anyway, I won't bore you with the details, but I'll measure all of these and write them down. Before we get to the results, I should just say that I did spot the error in my method, which was to tear the scales first to 0 for the empty measuring cylinder, which was correct, and then tear it again after adding the funnel, which was wrong because I then noted down the weight without the funnel. This means I was weighing the rice minus the weight of the funnel. The funnel weighs 28.3 grams, so I have added that back into the numbers to correct them. So here are the results. Not really a huge amount of difference, although basmati and quick cook are the outliers. For quick cook, that's easy to understand because it's been processed by parboiling then drying, so that might have increased the grain volume a bit, disproportionately to the weight. I think basmati might just be lighter per unit volume because of the way the grains stack or don't. I don't think these results really have very much to reveal about the differences in the way the rice puddings came out. If anything, the lightness of the quick cook rice means that that dish was the one where I added the greatest volume of rice, yet it's the one that was most watery at the end. The properties of the grain itself, the absorbency and the makeup of the starches probably has the greatest effect on the rice pudding outcome. When calculated as weight per cup, there's 24 grams of difference between pudding rice, the most dense, and quick cook, the least dense. 24 grams of rice is about a handful, so that's not completely insignificant. It might be interesting to repeat the rice pudding experiment using consistent volumes of rice rather than equal weights. I think you might get more variation in the outcomes. But that's an experiment somebody else can try if they so wish. I'm not going to do that. We're at Holt Heath today, near Wimborne. And there was a quite significant forest fire here last year in August, which has scorched a lot of the landscape. I actually came here for kind of selfish reasons. I was hoping to find morels in the woodland there where it's been burnt, because forest fires can be a trigger for morel mushrooms, and they are in season, but we didn't find anything. So I'll have to try morels another time. I've not successfully found any yet. But anyway, so this was burnt down in August, and it's a lot of the top growth. This would have probably been heather and bracken and gorse here. It's just completely gone. And the topsoil has washed away a fair bit because obviously there were no plants to hold it in place. You can see it's the underlying sand here. Topsoil is actually quite thin on a heath like this. This silver birch tree might not come back. I think the bark at the base of the tree has been probably cooked, and it doesn't look like, I don't know, it might do, it might. Some of the trees we've seen are well and truly dead. Some of them have managed to survive and probably will live at least until the next fire. Nature will reclaim this though. Even already, we've got little mosses down here. And that's a liverwort in there. And there are various little plants just starting to grow and starting to recolonize this soil. So we've got, you know, there are things happening. In fact, that there is a silver birch seedling. So that will be a tree one day. And some of these species on the heath here, they will tend not to germinate. The seeds will tend not to germinate unless they've been a little bit scorched. So it is, although the start of this fire might have been humans carelessly discarding a cigarette or a barbecue or something, or it could have been lightning, or it could have been some other natural cause. The gorse and heather and bracken does tend to build up on these heaths until something burns it down. So fire is a natural part of this landscape, even though this fire may not have been of natural causes. But yeah, a lot of the plants here will expect to be, if that's the right word, to be scorched and burnt off. Burning returns nutrients to the soil, it activates some kinds of seeds, and it provides space for new things to grow. So this is in April,
So it's been about 6 or 7 months, something like that, since this burnt. There's not an awful lot of sign of life, but there are beginnings of things sprouting. There's a little succulent there, sedum or something like that, maybe. Foxgloves. Lots of little tufts of grass. I've seen the shoots of bracken coming up as well in places where the soil was not quite so cooked, because they're just underground root systems. They have rhizomes or something like that that they will grow from. So yeah, there are signs of life coming back here. There are a couple of houses just over the hill there. The fire almost got to the houses. So can you imagine living in a house as a forest fire is approaching and you're just watching the flames get closer? That cannot have been fun for those people. Anyway, yeah, so this is what it's like now, but I think we'll come back here later in the year, maybe like in autumn or something like that. There's groundsel growing there. Yeah, I think we'll come back later in the year and see how well this is recovered. See what sort of recovery has happened. There's a bit of bracken just sprouting up out of the soil. I suspect we will find that it'll take, it will take years for this to properly recover. But I think we will probably find that by the end of this year, it's green again at the very least. So that's the thing to look forward to. This is Holt Heath, as I say, near Wimborne. It's a rabbit latrine there by the look of it. And I'm seeing these must be molehills. So, and they're recent, so presumably the moles survived. I imagine they just burrow down very deep. But yeah, so here we are. Here's a this is burnt. That's not a silver birch, or is it? Maybe a small silver birch. There's a pine here. This one's probably dead, but some of those seeds in those cones will have needed to be activated by fire. Is that a mushroom? No, it's just a flint. I thought that was the cap of a mushroom down there, but it's just a flint. But down here, see, we've got, there we go, young silver birch. And again there, we've got, there's sorrel growing there, gorse sprouting there and being prickly already. Another little silver birch, the fiddleheads of bracken coming up through the burnt soil. So yeah, nature's coming back. We'll come back here at the end of the year, or towards the end of the year, and see see how it's developed. I think that'd be an interesting thing to just monitor. And so most of this is gorse or furze. Always reminds me of Dr. Seuss' "What Was I Scared Of" story when I see these sort of branches scorched like this. And yes, this is devastation, but look, it's growing back from the roots. And this stuff doesn't do very well unless it's burnt down, or at least removed every decade or so. Gorse, once it gets too big, it just kind of smothers itself and dies and becomes very leggy and unproductive. So what we've got here is actually gorse that's burnt down, but all of the top growth, all of that, the nutrients and whatnot in that top growth have been returned to the soil, and this will spring up more vigorous than ever. So this is probably what it looked like before that fire. So thick carpet of heather, dwarf gorse there, bigger gorse bushes sticking up, dry grasses, mosses, a kind of peaty topsoil, and it's all got lots of dry material, so a tiny little spark even today would just send this up in flames. This is why those disposable barbecues are banned in a lot of places on heathland and woodland and stuff like that, because those sorts of things, people don't necessarily use them very carefully, and they are the root cause of a lot of fires. Anyway, but this is probably what it looked like before. But you can see that this silver birch tree here is not very old, So this one might be something that sprang up after a fire on this piece of heathland maybe 5-6 years ago. Like I say, it's not necessarily a bad thing for fire to happen on these habitats, because especially the gorse is like a really resinous plant and it's adapted to burn. Yeah, imagine, look at all the dry stuff down there, all of this dry dead thatch here. It would not take much to set light to that. And we can tell this has burnt in the relatively recent past, because the subsoil here has got a lot of flint in it, and this flint contains iron, and when it gets hot, when it's heated, it turns red. So there we go, there is a piece of flint there that has at some point in the fairly recent past been cooked by fire, and it's turned red like that. That's what happens. You see that on the beach a lot on the south coast here. If people have a beach bonfire and it's a flint beach, the flints turn red on the surface. It is only a surface phenomenon, and so if we broke that in half, we'd find it's grey inside, or possibly light brown. So after a while, that surface will weather off and it will return to the same colour as all these other pieces of broken flint here. So that's evidence that sometime in the last couple of decades maybe, there has been fire here. And here's an example of gorse that's been grown without fire for long enough, and you can see there's just a lot of dead material gathered up under here. There's a blanket of tinder basically at the bottom of the bushes. The bushes themselves aren't actually that productive because all of the growth is up the top there in this almost like a forest canopy. So these are still alive, they're still flowering, they're still productive, but nearly everything else underneath here has been crowded out, and there is a lot of flammable material here. So this just wants to burn, you know, the gorse can handle it because it'll just burn down and it'll grow up again. So yeah, there is a natural cycle to it, much as it's potentially inconvenient for humans because we build our houses next to these things. This gorse, this little stand of gorse here, which is, you know, towering above my head, wants to burn so that it can renew itself. So places like this, they will do a controlled burn of the gorse every now and again if necessary. So they'll, you know, cordon off, create fire breaks, burn off a piece to allow the heathland to renew itself. So it is a thing that is managed, but the fire we looked at earlier was not managed. That was I think it's believed to be an act of arson. Somebody started it on purpose, it's believed.
Welcome back to Insufficiently Weird Stuff in a Can. Today we've got unmeat. This is actually a thing I picked up in a supermarket in Spain. I just was caught by the title, unmeat. It's a plant-based meat substitute for chicken, apparently. Now, I'm not going to say that every episode of Weird Stuff in a Can is weirder than this, but it just seemed like it was a little bit tenuous to have an episode of its own, just because really the only weird thing here is the product name. So, this is chicken teriyaki. They've avoided using the word chicken there because regulations and pedants and all sorts of things. Ready to eat. Plant-based chicken teriyaki based on soy protein with soy sauce. Interestingly, they've just used chicken, the whole word here. Ingredients: water, soy protein, 25%, soy sauce, 7%, which is water, soybeans, wheat, salt, alcohol, sugar, acidulants, which are E262, E270 and E330. Sugar, soy oil, mirin, which is sweet rice wine. Flavourings contains barley. Modified starch, garlic, pineapple juice, sesame oil, spices. Colour, E150 contains sulfites. Thickener, E415, yeast extract. Nutritional information is there if you're interested. Let's talk. Manufactured for the Philippines. But yeah, as I say, I bought this in Spain. It is a pull tab can, but I'm going to open it with a can opener because I prefer to. Okay, well there it is. I wasn't expecting quite so much sauce as that, but there we go.
It says it's ready to eat, so I probably will eat a piece cold straight out of the can. But it's these chunks of, there's a smallish one, chunks of soy protein. I think it's been textured to give it a meat-like fibrous texture. Smells, well, it smells quite grainy and soy beany, as of course it would, but it does smell meaty as well. It's not bad. Savoury, plausibly teriyaki flavour sauce. Yeah, all right. I'm going to actually have some of this for my lunch today. I'm going to cook some just cheap instant ramen noodles, stir fry a few vegetables, serve this with it. Back in a moment when that's all done. This is probably going to get a bit messy, but I am going to shred up this unmeat, or at least pull it apart a little bit to put it in the pan. It actually has the texture, I would say, more like barbecue spare ribs, pork spare ribs. More like pork than chicken, I would say, the texture. But it is a bit of a moot point, really, because it's, you know, textured vegetable protein. It isn't meat. Okay, I think that's enough of that. A little splash of water, just to deglaze that pan a bit. So I will have a bit of this sauce on there, and then I'll reduce that because there's a bit of water in there as well. Okay, so my noodles, and then kind of over the top of that, some of this stir-fried vegetables with unmeat. Okay, well, how does it stand up when it's combined with noodles and other things? Let us find out. When it's warmed up, it goes quite a lot softer. Definitely more tender when warmed up. I wouldn't say that's the best meat substitute I've had, but it's certainly not the worst. When it's cold, it's a bit like those little dried tofu snack things. When it's warm, it's quite a lot softer, almost as soft as mushroom. Quite pleasant, not quite meaty enough to be convincing, but all things considered, not too bad. Earlier in this video, I attempted to find morels and I was not successful. That's not the first time I've gone hunting morels and not found any. In fact, I've never actually managed to find morels growing wild. I'll keep looking, but I did want to try cooking something with fresh morels. I've never actually eaten fresh morels. So here we go. I went to Dorchester Market. There's a great big fruit and vegetable stall there. I knew I'd be able to get morels when they're in season. And so I bought a small bag of morels. I think these were imported from Kosovo, and they were £40 a kilo, which sounds horrendous, but they don't weigh very much. There's 36 grams here, including the bag, which is how they sell them to you. You have to pay, they weigh them in the bag, so you pay for the bag at £40 a kilo. So 36 grams comes out to this value of morels, which I'm going to cook for my lunch today. But I did have a rummage and picked out the nicer looking ones, but they do look a little bit dried up. But I think that will be okay, because we need to soak them anyway. We will need to wash these thoroughly and cut them in half and give them a good rinse. So I'm going to plonk them in some cold water there, try and get them to sink, which they may not do immediately. Anyway, I'm going to give them a soak for about an hour probably. Might come back and turn them over so that the other side gets soaked. Give them a little swish around in the water. I'm not going to throw that water away. Well, I am going to throw that water away, but I'm going to throw it in my woods and see, because there might be some spores coming loose in that water. And if I sprinkle that in our woods, you never know. We might end up inoculating the forest floor there with morels. Anyway, back in a moment when those have had a soak. A change has taken place. These have really swelled up quite big actually, so they obviously had got a bit dehydrated at the market there, but they seem to be fine. Time to drain these and cook them now. Cut them in half. Yeah, they're hollow. They're like a sponge-like texture on the outside, but on the inside they're hollow. So I'm going to cut them all open. They have actually taken water inside as well. So I'll cut them all open like that. I think for most of them, I will quarter them and cut them into, in fact, I'll cut them into little pieces. They're quite crisp. So most of them I'm going to cut them into little pieces like that, but I will keep 1/2 intact for garnish. And these need to be quite thoroughly cooked. So generally speaking, wild mushrooms, that, you know, it's true of a lot of wild mushrooms actually, you need to thoroughly cook them. Morels in particular are, I believe, potentially mildly toxic until they're fully cooked. So I'm not really sure if I'm actually going to get the fresh morel, the proper fresh morel experience here, because these were semi-dehydrated all on their own. Anyway, that's my morel pieces, and at the moment they smell... They don't smell like normal mushrooms. They are rather distantly related to normal mushrooms. They smell slightly sweetish, earthy, savoury, not especially mushroomy. So over a gentle heat, I'm going to melt some butter, more butter than that I think, possibly even more butter than that. That might seem like a lot of butter, because it is. As that butter just starts to foam, my pieces of morel, including my one big garnish piece, in the pan. And I'm going to gently saute these in butter for at least 10 minutes. While that goes on there, look at this go on here. 1 egg, oat flour. Don't know how much that is, but it's like a heaped dessert spoonful. Plain flour, about the same amount. And then as I whisk that, just going to add some milk. That's not enough milk. Seems like about enough. Okay, I think that's about right. I'm looking for a thinnish sort of batter. It will thicken a little bit as it stands, because I'm going to serve my morels inside a pancake. Meanwhile, over here my morel pieces have gone quite tender. I'm going to cook them a little bit longer though. Okay, I reckon those are done. And yeah, there is enough butter in there, because we're also going to make a sauce. So just starting to take a little bit of crispy edge there. That piece I'm going to take out and set aside. In here, a little bit of crow garlic. This is foraged crow garlic, a bit like chives. A teaspoonful of plain flour. Just going to fry that flour a tiny bit first, and then a little splash of milk. And I'll lift it off the heat if I think it's going to go lumpy. And that milk is getting thickened up by that flour, by the roux we made. We're going to have a little bit of cream in there as well. Just single cream. Well, I said a little bit, but that was a bit more than a little bit. Some bacon that I've previously fried and chopped into little pieces. A little bit more milk, just to loosen that off. And some cheese. Some grated cheese, coastal cheddar. I'll just allow that to melt into that sauce. Just bring that back up to the heat when I've got my pancake ready. It might need a little bit more liquid in it. It's starting to congeal a bit, but that's fine. Meanwhile, I'm going to get this pan hot. My pancake batter, while we've been waiting and wittering, has thickened up a little bit. And I'm actually going to cook my pancake in the fat that came off the bacon. Less than a teaspoonful of that fat should be plenty. Okay, I'm going to make a pancake, so in with the batter. That's probably enough for now. Roll that round so that we get full coverage. Looks about right. And I find this oat flour makes really fluffy pancakes. For anyone watching, probably from the United States, saying, that's not a pancake, it's a crepe. That's what we call pancakes here. Pancakes is a category of things that includes the thick Scotch pancakes, but also includes things thinner like this.
But yeah, this is the most common, I would say, probably type of pancake in England, at least, because on Shrove Tuesday, just before Lent, it's known as Pancake Day, and it's traditionally it's for using up all of the things you're meant to not eat in Lent. And so people cook pancakes, and they're like this. Not normally with oat flour, that's just something I'm doing today. Oh, it's torn. Okay. First pancake might be a disaster. Bit more of that bacon fat. And pancake number 2. Okay, let's give that a flip then. This one's slightly thicker. Not bad. Okay, my Morels in cheese sauce. Yeah, I'm going to have to bring that back up to warm and just add a tiny bit more milk to loosen that. Oh, that looks good. Right, I'm going to get the camera set up, ready to serve this pancake. Some of my Morel with cheese and bacon and cream sauce. Just roll that up like that and garnish. Voila! Before I contaminate my palate with the bacon and the herbs, you know, and everything else, and the cream and the cheese, I'm going to taste a little bit of this Morel. Quite a different flavour from your regular mushrooms, and quite a different texture as well. The texture reminds me of tripe in a way, earthy, just not mushroom flavours. It's interesting because it's like mushrooms, but it's not like mushrooms. I don't know how to describe it, but it's an interesting flavour that is quite distinct from your normal mushrooms. Almost a little bit spicy. And there's my stuffed pancake with Morels and bacon and cheese. That I really like. That's just such a nice way to have wild mushrooms. Hopefully, now that my first taste of fresh Morels has been from ones I've bought, I'll just see them everywhere now. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But yeah, this water that they were soaked in will go on our woodland, and maybe the spores that might be in there might germinate, and we might have our own Morels next year, year after, something like that. Mushroom cultivation is not really as simple as that, but we might be lucky. We'll try distributing this hopefully spore-laden water in a couple of different places. I've got a place here where it's all bits of wood chip and bark and such. In amongst the raspberries here, there's a lot of old wood. I mean, I could put them on this stack here, but I think I probably won't. I'm going to put some in the downstairs woods. It's just started chucking it down with rain and I'm out here without a coat. So in this bit of wood here, there's an area where I've been cutting firewood, so I'll put a little splash on there, because Morels quite famously like wood chips and stuff. Oh, look, Solomon seal. Interesting. And then I think we'll go along here a little bit. There's an area just the other side of our big beech tree. This clear area here. And we'll just drizzle a bit of that stuff on there. There we go. Like I say, not tremendously likely to work, but worth a try. Down here by the door of the downstairs greenhouse, I put some pots with chestnuts and walnuts and other things in them in the autumn. And there seems to be some activity going on, so let's pull these up and have a look and see what we got. So firstly, this one. This was quince seedlings. So the quinces that I chopped up to make my quince jelly, I put some seeds in this compost, and we've got
At least 2 seedlings coming up there. Those are definitely quince seedlings. So that's good. Let's have a look and see what... There's nothing in this one. This pot here... This is chestnut. So that's a sweet chestnut. Looks like just the one sprouting at the moment. I'm just going to check and see that there's no tap roots coming out the bottom, because sometimes these things put down a big tap root before they actually sprout. So that's one of those chestnuts. This is the other one, I think. So that's... Yeah, again, no worries about tap root at the moment, but I will pot these up. Yeah, that's chestnut. So we've got 2 chestnut seedlings. And it looks like we might have walnuts as well. There's one along the end there. I think this is where the walnut seedling started. Let's have a look and see what this one is. I'm glad I labelled them, because one of these things, yeah, that's walnut. So that's a walnut seedling coming up there. I don't think that's just grass or some weed, but that's definitely a sprout from a walnut. And there are roots coming out the bottom there, so I think this one I will put in a larger pot or something sooner rather than later. In fact, I've got this small raised bed by the upstairs greenhouse here, which normally we use that for salad greens and stuff. I think I might use that as a nursery bed for my tree seedlings. So I'll plant them up in here. That'll make them much easier to handle and keep watered and stuff during the year than if they were in a pot. We'll grow them on here for a season, and then in the autumn we'll dig them up once they've dropped their leaves, and we can transplant them as bare root trees. That's a walnut seedling there. That's the only one I can see coming up, so let's carefully take this out. It looks like we might have 2 sprouting. I'm just going to very carefully pull that apart. So there's one of them. Definitely a walnut sprouting. There's the other one. It hasn't put a shoot up yet, but it will. Yep, looks like the third. I can't remember how many. I thought I put 3 in the pot, but looks like maybe only 2. So I'm going to plant this one. Get its root right down there. There's one. I think I better mark that somehow. Just mark it like that for the moment with a random tag. I'll have another one here. Just get the tap root, give it a chance to go right down, and the shoot there above the ground. And that one will mark like that. Probably something similar going on in this pot here. We've got at least 1 shoot coming up, which is a walnut. So again, well, you can see that one. See, the taproot's gone and got itself stuck in that hole in the pot. So I've just got to carefully tease that out. So there's that one. And it looks like that one isn't going to germinate. It's just rotted by the look of it. Yeah, we'll get rid of that. So this one though, can go down here. And again, I'll just give the taproot a chance to get down, leave the shoot above ground and mark it. And then we've got one more here for a total of 4 walnut plants, it looks like. No, I've got 2 germinations in here, I think. Yeah, so one there, another one there. So we'll plant another one here. Yeah, that taproot's gone a bit wonky because it was in a small pot, but it'll come back. It'll be fine. Okay, so that's one there. And then the last one here, well, I'll have to find a space over here for it somewhere. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 walnuts, which is good. Let's see how we did with the chestnuts. So there is obviously at least one. It looks like it might just be the one. There's one of the others, and that's just rotted, so we won't put that in the soil. There's that one there. And yeah, these are sweet chestnuts, not conkers. So my hope is that we'll be able to establish these in our own little bit of woodland here. So there we go. Now, actually, let's plant it upright. Let's give it the best chance of being a straight, upright tree. There we go. Okay. And then this one, well, again, we've got at least one germinating in here. It looks like it might just be the one. Can't even see the other chestnut. Oh, there it is. It's, yeah, that's not germinated, but we've got this one, so that can go over here. Deeper than that. And there we go. So we'll give those a good puddle in, which will help to settle the soil around the roots. And I just need to keep those watered if it doesn't rain. They're outdoors now. Well, they've been outdoors all winter. So these needed to be exposed to cold weather to make them germinate. A lot of tree seeds are like that. They need to be exposed to cold to make them break dormancy. But there we go. So we've got 5 walnut trees and 2 chestnuts. I'll cover this little plot with some netting just to keep the birds from pulling those up. While we're up here, this is the watercress, the littlest watercress farm that I made last year. We have harvested watercress from this, but I'm going to draw a line under this experiment for now. For one thing, this wooden stand that I made 2 years ago is starting to rot now. But also, it just wasn't all that productive. It was an interesting experiment, but I think it's run its course. So I'm going to get rid of this. We might use this space for something else. So yeah, just a bit of netting on there, really just to keep the birds off and next door's cat. And hopefully, at the end of this growing season, we'll have some little saplings there that we can plant out in the woods over there. It's a beautiful spring day, and we've got some gardening to do. We've got to get these raised beds ready for planting. We've got some broad beans in here which aren't doing all that well, but we've got some more plants coming in pots. Oh look, there's a bee pollinating my broad beans there. Yeah, we didn't have fantastic germination on the broad beans. These have been in since November, but we've got some more plants to fill in here. We've got this bed to sort out. I think these are my Alexander seedlings coming up here. Just guessing by their appearance, which is not like anything else that's growing here as a weed. My perennial leeks, or leeks grown as perennials, are doing pretty well, but we need to do a bit of weeding here. The chard that I decided to try to overwinter has just not worked, so that's coming out. So I will protect the Alexanders, protect the leeks. The rest of it just needs the weeds taken off the top. Runner beans are going here, and courgettes over here. So this is the one we'll give the most compost probably. So where's the compost coming from? Well, this huge compost bin, which is now in the upstairs part of the woods here, I'll show you. So this modular compost bin here, which was actually 2 small square compost bins that we adapted into one great big one, this is in the upstairs woods now. So this is full up. Probably at the end of this year we'll take the sides off and put a tarp over it and let that rot down for a year or 2 before we actually try to take the compost out. We've already done that once before in the downstairs woodland, which I'll take you to now. Steps still holding up really well, by the way. So this is the compost that we did on the first run with that bin, and obviously it was originally this tall. It's gone down to half its height, but we put a tarp over it last year, so this has been here for 2 years now. This should be ready to dig and put on the garden. We're going to take the tarp off and see what we got. Okay. Oh, Eva, you can't come in here, Poppet. Sorry. Right, let's see what we've got under here then. There's a burrow there. I think we may encounter rats or something when we dig this out, but yeah, there's burrows going in there. Obviously a lot of the stuff on the outside here is dry, so it'd still be usable as mulch. So we'll just scrape that off. But the stuff that's in the middle should hopefully be quite well rotted down. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I mean, there's still some big sticks in there we'll probably just have to filter out, but that's certainly well rotted enough that it can go on the garden as mulch. Can't get a wheelbarrow upstairs anymore because we built the stairs, but I can put it in manageable buckets. So before anything else, we'll get the netting off of the surround of this plot here. We'll get the large weeds out and then mulch over the rest of the top of everything else. That's the netting and everything clear. And we'll just get rid of these weeds. Now, a common definition of a weed is a plant that's just growing where you don't want it. And there are a couple of interesting things here. There's one here. This is lemon balm. Pretty sure it is. I'm just going to crush a leaf and smell it. Yep, that is lemon balm. So that's a herb. Well, we'll carefully transplant that somewhere else. This is a little forget-me-not. So I think we'll also move that somewhere else. Blue flower. They do exist. Everything else is nipplewort, don't know, hairy bittercress, dandelion, ragwort. What else have we got here? Stinging nettles. And there. So yeah, a few weeds to come out, but not a lot. And then we'll get the mulch on. So, forget-me-not, we'll take a good chunk of soil with that so that we don't upset the roots too much. That will move somewhere else. I think there might be just down here. We've planted a crabapple tree which is now just in bloom. I think we'll plant this down here somewhere. Probably just like there. Okay. I'll give that a little water in just to settle the shock we've given it. Okay, do you want to be watered, little flower? No? Just give that a little drink just to settle those roots in. And while I'm here, I'll give all my tree babies another drink. These are doing okay though, because look, this chestnut here, despite being transplanted a couple of days ago, the leaves are still looking nice and vibrant and full of moisture. So we didn't kill it moving it, not yet anyway. Right, then this lemon balm. We'll find a new home for that. Okay, not got a lot of root on it, so we'll make sure we water that when we put it in. That one's going to go in the downstairs garden somewhere. So I think actually it's going to go where that pot is, that pot that's just growing lily of the valley and grass, which is neither of the things we want there. I think I'll plant it down in this little corner. Not going to need a very big hole because there's not a lot of root to it. And the soil's pretty poor here, but it really won't mind. It's one of those herbs that doesn't mind poor conditions. But there we go, lemon balm. And I'll also give that a nice puddle in, just to settle the roots. And then on with the weeding, which will not be difficult because this is a cultivated plot. So these weeds will come out with relative ease. Just take them out like that. shake off the soil and leave it here. I'm not going to pick out every single tiny weed because we're going to be mulching over this with that compost, and that will smother some of these smaller seedlings and either inhibit them or stop them altogether. Soil here is quite dry and crumbly because it's had a lot of organic stuff put into it in the past. This is the bed where the first year we were here, we put seaweed on here. So it's had a fair old bit of organic material combined into it, which is good, but it'll need the mulch to keep the moisture in. So weeding is complete, and we got a bucket full of weeds and their roots to get rid of. They will not go to waste. I can see another lemon balm over there. I might just let that grow. Those weeds will go in here, which is my liquid plant food compost bin. I might just tip that. That's the remains of last year's compost. I might just tip that out first. No reason why I couldn't just start on top of that, but I didn't even pack it down at the end of last year. I think I'll do that now because I can do that on here. So the bricks and the mesh will come with me to make the next start of the next bin, and this plug of lovely compost I'll just spread along the middle of this plot where we're going to plant the courgettes. And then bricks in there like that, mesh on top of the bricks, weeds on top of the mesh, and then that bit of plastic there, and another brick. And as that rots down aerobically, the liquids containing a lot of plant nutrients will dribble out into that little can down there, and I'll dilute that and water it back to the plants, liquefying the dead to feed the living. And then this stuff, this is our compost. It's just going to go on that, and then I'll spread it about. Don't know why we've got a pine cone in there. Right, so that's the amount that's going on this plot. Now you might be asking, why aren't we putting more compost on the other two plots as well? The theory is we rotate things in these three plots. So this year we'll grow courgettes here, next year we'll grow them on that plot, the year after we'll grow them on that plot. So this is the one that's going to have the courgettes, which is the really hungry crop. So next year, next spring or or this autumn maybe, we'll put some compost on this plot. And so each one gets a top up every 3 years. And some things prefer to grow, like beans and peas especially, prefer to grow in soil that hasn't just had compost added. Some things do better in a more mature soil. I'm not going to dig this in at all. I'm just going to spread it as evenly as I can across the surface. Now there will be weed seeds in here because we're not using a very hot composting method, so there might be weeds waiting to grow in here. We'll just deal with that. As you saw earlier, it's not that difficult to get the weeds out of this soil, so I don't need to worry about trying to get sterilised compost. It's just really a case of weeding if, or rather when, something grows that we don't want. So yeah, that's about what I wanted to see. Level with or slightly proud of the surface of the raised bed. This soil is really hungry. We're on chalk here, and so this is a really hungry soil, and it will just consume a lot of this organic matter. Okay, and these hoops, I don't know where these came from actually. I think they were here when we moved in. So these hoops serve a double purpose actually. Firstly, we will use them just to support the netting to keep the cat and dog off. But when I plant my courgettes, I can put a clear tarp over the top of this and make a little polytunnel here. That'll give them a really nice head start. Okay, yeah, something like that. I'm not going to try and keep birds out of here because actually the blackbirds digging around in there for worms will not do any harm at all. So these other two plots, I'm just going to go over and weed out this bittercress, dandelions, pull out the old chard there, just get rid of some weeds. The weeds will go in the composter over there. I'm not very worried about the fact that there will be weed seeds just circulating here. It's trying to make this soil sterile would be a lost cause. Let me show you this bittercress. If you just so much as touch this plant, these little seed pods on here spring open and catapult seeds everywhere. Trying to eradicate these weeds from this soil would be a fool's errand, because this soil is just a massive seed bank for these weeds. So we just have to accept that they're part of the whole process here. They don't do any harm when they're on the surface there. In fact, they're stopping the surface from getting compacted. And when they go in the composter, they will provide some nutrients that we can return back to the plants we would prefer to have growing here. So I've weeded. I haven't done a perfect job of it. I've weeded around my perennial leeks. And these are just regular old leeks that we're deciding to grow as perennials. So when we want a leek, we just cut it just below the surface of the soil, take all of the top part and cook and eat that, leave the root underneath the ground, and it grows again. And we've done that several times here, so all of these plants here have been cut at least once. This one here, where we cut it, it's divided into 7 plants. And that's what leeks want to do. In fact, can you notice anything unusual about these leeks? Think about it for a moment. If you've grown leeks before, what's different about these leeks? I mean, one thing is they are starting to bolt. That's not what I was looking for. I'm looking for something that's missing from this picture. There's no disease at all. There is no rust. There's no none of the diseases that commonly affect leeks. Now, it could just be good luck. It could just be coincidence, but these are leek plants kind of living their best life. They are growing as they want to grow. They don't want to be just grown as an annual and then cut and then dug up. They want to grow as perennials. And so these leeks are established. They've got their roots nicely distributed in the soil underneath there. We will disturb them in a minute. I'll just have a look. I'll just tell you what that's about. But these are leeks kind of living their best life, and as a result, now, like I say, could be just pure coincidence. I could just be lucky. They're really healthy. But anyway, yes, so we got a gap over here. We've got a gap here where I think we did actually either lose a plant or we dug one up, so we could plant some extra ones there. This clump here, I think we'll dig this up and divide it. Oh, look, that's a don't know, is that well, it's a bug of some sort, a true bug. It could be yeah, it's gone off towards the rhubarb. It's probably a bug like a knotweed bug or something like that. Anyway, right, this clump here, don't get distracted, Michael. This clump here I'm going to lift and divide now and spread it out and give it some space to grow into more mature plants. So garden fork, big garden fork. I'm going to get in well away from the clump so that I don't damage it too much. I'm going to get right down and lift the whole clump, giving it a little wiggle on either side. Try and get the whole clump up. There we go. So once that's up, I'll show you what it looks like. So there's the clump, and look at how much root that's got and how healthy looking that is. So I can get in there now and pull those apart. I probably need 2 hands for that. So we can get in there and just divide that into multiple plants. And look, it's actually even formed a bulb there. I'm not sure we'll keep that bit, but these are all quite healthy, independent plants now, with their own root systems. In fact, they're almost like garlic scales. See, look how much that looks like a garlic clove there. Now, because obviously they are closely related to garlic. So anyway, we've got now 7 plants. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm just going to give them each now their own little space, spread them out a little bit, and we will have even more leeks. Now, I don't have to just cut these above ground. I can, if I want to, pull up a whole leek, replace it with one of its siblings. And so we can still harvest entire leeks. If you like the white part of the plant, obviously then that's what you need to do. but I quite like the green tops. So not very much ceremony to get these into the ground. Just digging a little slit trench like that, drop it down, let the soil fall back down on top of it, and it's as simple as that. And I'll do that along here as well. So just get the, not very easy with one hand, get the soil opened up like that. Drop one down, let the soil fall back. Now those plants won't have exactly enjoyed being transplanted like that at this particular moment. They won't mind the extra space when they get the chance, but they will potentially suffer transplant shock here. So I'm just going to give everything here a really nice water, just to offset the potential damage of that transplant shock, just to give them some moisture around the roots, help them recover from the affront of being moved around. But there we go. Yeah, as I say, these are leeks being grown as perennials, which is what the plant wants to be. Now, as I did say earlier, you can tell this plant here is bolting. This plant here is trying to produce a flower stalk. In fact, many of them probably are. And I don't care. I will let it do that. It's quite a decorative thing, actually. It grows an enormous pom-pom of pale purple flowers. Quite pretty in its own right. Very good for the bees. I will just let it do that. There's no obligation for me to harvest every single little bit of top growth here, because this little plot of leeks is a little collaboration between me and the leeks, really. I will give them space to grow, I will nurture them, and I will harvest some of the top growth for the pot, but I do need to leave it alone enough to let it have its own life and for the green parts to feed the roots. So it is definitely a partnership, really, between me and the plants here. And the weed bin is now completely full up. It won't take very long for that to compress down and the bin juice to come out, which we'll use as fertilizer, possibly for the leeks, but certainly for some of the things in the vegetable patch here. The rhubarb. We decided not to force the rhubarb this year, because actually I quite like rhubarb when it's not forced. So I think what we'll do is pick some of this rhubarb today and make maybe a rhubarb crumble or something, or rhubarb pie, but made with just regular rhubarb that hasn't been forced. When you force rhubarb, you get a really sweet, tender stalk on it. When you don't, you get a quite astringent, sour, very flavourful rhubarb. So forced rhubarb is lovely and sweet and delicate, but it's not so tasty as regular unforced rhubarb. So we didn't force it this year. It looks like it does need dividing, actually. There's multiple crowns in there now. Perhaps that's the thing we'll do in the end of the year, and maybe find if there's someone we can give some away to. Anyway, yeah, I think we'll pick some rhubarb and make a rhubarb pie. I want to plant some radish seeds. I'm not intending to grow radishes for the roots, although I do like radishes. I'm going to grow these and let them bolt and let them go to seed and produce seed pods. You can buy varieties that are specifically bred for their seed pods, but any variety of cultivated radish will do this. So I need to start a load of radish plants. Normally you would just sow them in a drill in the garden soil. I tend to lose them if I do that. So I'm going to start them and then plant them out. I could plant them in little modules like this, but turning them out of there does tend to damage the roots. So I'm going to try something else. This is a technique that my friend and neighbour showed me about. So I've got a strip of bubble wrap here. And I'm going to put my seed compost on here. Like that. Put a layer of seed compost on there. I'll give that a little water. Just to settle that down. Okay, so we got a strip of seed compost. Now my radish seeds. I'm going to plant in a little row along here. somewhere fairly near one edge, like this, a little drill of radish seeds like this. I think that's fairly even. And then, and this is the cunning part, we'll just roll this up. Like that. So we've got a spiral of compost in there with the seeds in it. We could put a rubber band around that and just stand it up, but what I'll do instead, I think, is find an appropriately sized pot. Just stand that in a pot. A little bit more water in there. Like that. The water can drain straight through because there's no bottom edge on that plastic. It's just an open strip at the bottom. We can very easily water into the top here. The plastic will keep the compost relatively moist, and when those seeds germinate, they'll pop out the top here. Then to plant them out, we can just unroll that, and the plants will all come apart very easily, instead of having to damage the roots by teasing them out of a clump, out of a block. They'll be in a strip, and we can just tease the roots apart very easily without destroying the seedling plants. That's the theory. So second verse, same as the first, I'm going to do some lettuce. Now lettuce has got smaller seeds. The smaller seeds will need less burying, so we'll just plant them closer to that edge of the strip of compost. Lettuce seeds are these tiny little things. So we'll plant a few of those. They're very difficult to actually get evenly distributed, but I'll do my best. The seedlings of lettuces tend to be really delicate, and I often find that when I come to prick them out, so when I come to take them out, take them out of their seed tray or anything like that, I find myself damaging them. Even if I just carefully hold them by the leaves, I find myself damaging the plants. Yeah, it's probably my fault for being ham-fisted, but it is what it is. So yeah, we'll just roll that up. Find a suitable pot to keep it constrained. And there we go. And yeah, just a little bit more water probably in the top here. And I must label those before I forget which one's which. Radish, lettuce. It's time to get the upstairs greenhouse ready for tomatoes and things this year. I've taken the watering system completely out, and I'm going to reinstall it differently. So I've got plenty of spare tube. I've got all the attachments. It's fairly modular, but this time I'm not going to grow quite so many tomato plants. Last year I really crowded them in here. I had hanging baskets at the end. I just had too much tomato foliage and I couldn't get in here to pick them. So as a result, we wasted a lot of tomatoes. So I'm going to clear away the weeds. We've got some ivy and periwinkle coming through here. We've got oxalis down here. I'm just going to clear that out. Fork over the soil and then get the watering system installed. First thing to do is clear all this stuff out. Okay, this here is not a weed. This is my hardy capsicum, and I thought I'd killed this one by not watering it in the winter, but I can see some new growth coming there. I can't remember what it's called. I'll put the name of this on the screen, but it's supposedly frost hardy capsicum. So we're going to leave that growing. Hopefully we'll get some fruit off it this year. So that's the weeds more or less cleared. And this year I'm going to grow my tomatoes directly in the greenhouse border in the soil. So I may need to put some plant foods and fish blood and bone down or something like that when I actually plant them. But for now, just going to turn over the soil because there was some compost from last year's grow bags left on the surface. So I'll just give that a turn just to get that partly buried. Get rid of any weird little bits of plastic that keep turning up. Don't know what that was. And this is where I had the Cape gooseberries, and that was another problem, growing those indoors. In the greenhouse here, they just wanted to take over. So we won't be doing that this year. I think it's going to be peppers this side, because they don't grow quite so tall, and tomatoes that side. And the intention here isn't to try to double dig this or anything like that. I'm just looking to turn the soil over. Wow, the big iron vine eye. Don't know where that's come from. That must have been here in the soil all along. So yeah, I'm just looking to mix the compost up a bit. It is very dry because the watering system has been uninstalled and absent the whole winter. So the soil here is bone dry, but that does make it nice and easy to dig. So the plan is to get the watering system in and re-wet the soil. Just get a bit of moisture working here before I plant my tomatoes. I'm going to leave this piece of reflective foam here because that reflects the sunlight back onto the seedlings. Okay, so you'll notice that my hanging chains I had on this side of the greenhouse, if you do recall those, I've taken them down. That was an interesting experiment, but it didn't really work. So yeah, that one's run its course. Right, I'm going to brush off the path. There is a flagstone path underneath here, so I'll brush that off and then we'll get ready to put the watering in. So this greenhouse has 2-foot sections, so it's 8 feet long. So I'm going to assume that we plant 1 tomato in each of those 2-foot sections. So only 4 tomato plants along this side, maybe 1 plant of something at the end, and again 4 plants along here. So I want a total of 9 nozzles. And this is all my watering stuff, all my bits and bobs. So we want 9 of these things. I may not use those particular flexible watering things. There are some different ones as well. We want 9 of these. Yeah, each one of these then is just going to go in the middle, in front of the middle of this 2-foot section. Yeah, that's just too much stuff in there at the moment, but we'll deal with that in a minute. Okay, that's that. And then it's going to be a case of finding bits of tube that are the approximate right length to connect those where possible. I don't want to cut any new pieces if I can help it. Now you may have to just move these around a little bit because they have got a bit of wiggle room, but these connectors just push fit into there like that. So something like that. And yeah, as I say, it doesn't matter if the spacing isn't exact on these things. And then the end of that loop is going to connect back to here, and then there'll be a T-piece that comes out the door that connects to the valve and to the hose that will run across the lawn, to the timer and the tap. And the reason I make this a loop is that if one part of it gets blocked, the water can flow around the other way and get to the nozzles. So if we get a blockage in this pipe in one of the nozzles somewhere, the effect of it will be minimal. It will, at worst, in theory, only block one little section because the water can go around the other way. It also equalizes the pressure, so you don't end up with all of the plants nearest the feed end of the thing getting all of the water and just a little dribble coming out the far end. So there we go, that's the loop completed. So you can see that one's just a complete loop. Then it tees off here to a valve, and there's another valve here. This valve is a takeoff, so that one's shut. So if I apply a water feed to this bit here now at the moment, it'll water the greenhouse. If for some reason I want tap water at this end of the garden, I can turn that one on and that one off and run the tap, and then I'll get water coming out of here but not watering the greenhouse. So I've got the choice of where I direct the water to. The water has to come from that outside tap there and run all the way around the perimeter of the garden off to the greenhouse over there. So this hose reel will run up here like that, and then along the back of the garden just under the hedge. And then this end, where this adapter was quite difficult to find actually, so this is a hose pipe adapter to, I think it's like 1/4 inch or something like that, I can't remember, 12mm to 15mm. It was a hot tub accessory. It's not designed for watering systems, but it'll do. It's designed for warm water, so it's probably better than it needs to be. And that will attach to here, which is the feed for the greenhouse. And my watering timer, which I took indoors and gave it a few drops of descaling liquid in the autumn, should be ready to go back on the tap. Hopefully treating it before I put it into storage should have stopped it from getting bound up like the previous one did, but we'll see. I do hope these things have a multi-year lifespan. So timer unit on the tap, leader hose onto the bottom of that. The leader hose goes onto the hose reel round here, just because the hose reel is not quite long enough. Pinned down by the doorway here, just so that people don't trip over it. That's attached to that. That goes all the way to the greenhouse. I'll feed that underneath the hedge in a minute. But now, we should be able to turn it on and see some water coming out in the greenhouse. Let's give that a try. So the time's not right on it, but we should be able to just press and hold that button and then have it. Oh, I don't want it to water for an hour. I want it to water for a couple of minutes. I heard something click. Ah, the water's not on. We may need to try that again actually, because I think it needs the water pressure to activate the hose. So let's try that again. Okay, I think we've got water flowing. Although I can't really hear anything. Let's see if anything's coming out. No, I think we might have a little bit of work to do. The valve's open, so there should be water flowing right now, but there isn't. I heard it go click. I got a bit of work to do troubleshooting that valve then. Okay, it might just be that I'm an idiot. I had turned the water off inside so that the pipes wouldn't freeze outside. That's the feed to the tap. That was turned off. So let's try that again, shall we? So manual, 3 minutes. I can hear something, and the pipe did a little twitch there, so I think we might be in business. Yes, water is copiously flowing. Not necessarily in the right places at the moment, but it's working. So we've got water coming out the nozzles. I'm just going to leave that actually to run for the moment, and I'll come and tidy it up when it stops. All right, so that seemed to work. I just need to set the timer on the pump so it comes on at the right time of day. It had lost the time over winter. I think I took the batteries out actually, but anyway, as an alternative to these flippy floppy waterers, I have got these things that came with this pipe, but they've got a very tiny nozzle in the end. I think these are more like misters, and I don't really want to mist this because it wastes more water. It's better to actually have it drip if you can. So I've got a little bit of configuration of pipes to do. I've got a little bit of configuration of timer to do. I can replace these things. See, this one's got a T in it and 2 nozzles, but if I just push down on that little collar there, that bit just pops out, and we can replace that with a different pipe. It's got a different nozzle configuration. It's very easy, and I've got a whole load of those from previous iterations of this watering system. So I've got a whole collection of options here. Got loads of spare nozzles, loads of spare tube as well. So lots of options. I'll figure it all out. We'll get the thing configured and nice and neat and tidy, and then I'll leave it watering the ground for a few days to moisten this soil before we can get the tomato seedlings in here. So as I say, germination was poor on the broad beans that we planted here directly in the autumn. I don't know if it's just, there's something about chalk soil I think that can make beans and peas difficult to germinate. So either that or mice are eating them or something. Anyway, So Jenny started a whole load of more broad bean seedlings. I'm going to spread them out on this patch and get them planted in. They'll catch up quite quickly. Notionally, you get a successive crop if you start them at different times, but actually in practice the plants all kind of catch up and produce beans at the same time. So next door's dog barking at me at the moment, but yeah, so I've just got them spaced out like that. I'm going to fill in all the gaps with these seedlings, including the ones that have got to come out the multi-trays as well. So yep, we'll just get those planted in. Try and plant them with the minimum of disturbance to the roots, because they don't like that. Right, so there we go. And as ever, those will need a bit of water to settle them in. I'll come back and give them a proper water this evening when it's cooled down, but just for now, we'll give them a little drink just to settle the roots. A couple of things just to wrap up this garden segment of the video. Appreciate by the time you watch this video, it's not very seasonal. There's no way of avoiding that really. I can only make videos about things that have already happened, and by the time you get to see them, they may not be very topical or seasonal anymore. But anyway, so still waiting for these things in the spirals to germinate, but it's only been a couple of days. I've got my tomato seedlings coming up. I've got two different varieties that I'm growing this year. Golden Sunrise, which I was very happy with before, so I see we've got one tiny little seedling coming up there, and
Principe Borghese.
A Heritage Tomato, got two seedlings in the same module. I thought I only planted one seed in there, but maybe I'm misremembering. Chard, a couple of seedlings coming up, a couple of courgettes, just the green ones at the moment, not the yellow ones. The yellow ones haven't come up yet. So that's the seeds. One little weed, or rather new visitor to the garden, that I forgot to mention is this. This is corn salad. I did actually scatter some of the seeds of this on this plot last year. Didn't see any of them come up. But there we go, we've got a bit of corn salad growing there. This is an edible weed. I'm quite happy to see it here. It has these very, very tiny little flowers. I will try and get a close-up picture of those for you. But yeah, that's an edible wild plant. So things like that, like the bittercress, corn salad, chickweed, I don't really make any effort to try to eliminate them or anything from the garden, because whenever I want to, I can eat them. And the rhubarb, I did say we were going to pick some rhubarb and make a rhubarb pie, but I think that's going to be in a different video now, because this video is already getting very long. And finally, on the watering system, which is now completely working and is moistening the soil ready for planting, I haven't got a pipe in here at the moment, and just to stop dirt and invertebrates getting into that hole there and causing a blockage, I'm just going to put a little plug in there. Welcome to the comment positivity section. This is where we're going to showcase and celebrate and hopefully answer some of the interesting questions and comments that people made that contribute to the general positivity of the comment section on YouTube. Starting with, on one of my recent Spain videos, if you're back in the region, Bateria de Castillitos is very interesting. Yes, in fact it is. I've been there before, but before I was making videos for this YouTube channel actually. So yes, there's a gun battery on top of a big hill, not far from where I stay actually when I go to Spain. You can walk around the whole site. I think you can explore the fort, so it's a little bit kind of slightly almost urbex, but not quite. And yeah, it has been on my list, but thank you for reminding me. We'll bump that up the list. I think next time I go to Spain we might pay that a visit. On a video about concoction rice collaboration where I foraged some ramsons, someone asked, have you ever tried picking and pickling the unopened flower buds of ramsons to make something a bit like capers? I'm not sure how garlicky the buds taste, but they might be like a garlic flavoured caper, which could be good for making something like chicken piccata. As far as I know, the buds do pickle really well, and I was thinking that thought my own self when I was picking them. I'm definitely going to get up there and pick some of those while they're still available. They're not around for long, so I think I'll go and get some of those and we'll try pickling them. On to the porridge toast video now. I dreamt that my sister asked me to buy stuff to make meat cookies. When I asked for clarification, she said it's like regular cookies but with meat. I took this to mean meat instead of flour, with all the ingredients the same. I haven't had the courage to test this yet. So chocolate chip burgers?
I am curious, but I'm going to leave that one for you to try. You describing this is my porridge toast, my oat bread. You describing this as a dream come true is quite inspiring in an odd way. Dreams don't have to be retiring to a private island. Sometimes you just having an idea in your head and bringing it into the real world is satisfying enough. Really, really good point. I think sometimes when we talk about dreams come true, we talk about winning the lottery or you know, some major life event. But does that stop us from exploring the smaller ideas, from perhaps pursuing the smaller and maybe more achievable flights of fancy that would bring us joy? I think that's a good thing to ask ourselves is, am I dreaming? You know, I'm not saying don't dream big. By all means, dream big, aim high. But sometimes having smaller dreams, smaller aims as well, can bring us joy while we're waiting for the big thing to happen. So yeah, dream assorted sizes and then follow your dreams. Hi Mike, I love your videos. Can you tell me about your whisk? I love it. So it's a ball whisk. People always ask about this. In fact, what we'll do is go over to Kitchen Shrimp now, who will explain what a ball whisk is and what the benefits are. So this is a balloon whisk. This is quite a small one. This is a ball whisk. It's, again, probably a small example of what it is. The two different whisks have two different purposes and properties. So a balloon whisk is quite good for whisking things in a bowl. The rounded shape of the end there kind of matches the profile of the bowl. Quite good for whipping cream, whisking eggs, whisking anything liquid in a bowl. Balloon whisk, perhaps not always quite so good for whisking things in a pan or anything that's got a corner. Now you might not think that this pan has a corner because it's round, but when you look at it that way, there is a corner here. Think in 3 dimensions. So that radius of the whisk there doesn't quite get into that corner so easily. I mean, you can, by rotating the whisk, you can usually find something will get in there. So you can actually scrape out that corner with a balloon whisk. But in vessels where there's a corner, the whisk just doesn't always get into that corner. Enter the ball whisk. Obviously, it has no problems at all getting right into those corners. You can see it's got right in there. So I quite often find that a combination of the two is actually necessary. I often use a whisk to stir if I'm making a bechamel or something like that, rather than a spoon, because a whisk will help me to eliminate the possibility of lumps, and if we can keep everything moving off the bottom of the pan, then it won't burn and stick. But it's not quite so good at whipping. A balloon whisk is still superior for whipping air into things or actually intensely agitating something. So because of all of these different angles and different spaced out wires here, a balloon whisk will agitate and stir and whip things more effectively than a ball whisk, but a ball whisk is more effective at getting down into those corners. So I use both. On a cheese making video, having watched a few of these videos, I'm starting to think you might need to get a bigger, largest pan. I think you're right. In fact, you are right, because I already have. That's an old video, and since that video I've bought myself a much larger preserving pan that I can actually use for cheese making in the future. Maybe I should have another go at cheese making. But yeah, so I've got a big stock pot now, and actually now the limitation is the amount of heat that the cooker can put into it. So it might be that I now need to get a bigger, largest ring. I wonder if one of those little standalone induction hobs might be good for that. Might be a good thing anyway, because if I then needed to cook something outside, for example, because it's stinky, I'd be able to do that too. Back on the porridge toast. In fact, two kind of similar and related comments here, and so I'll talk about them together, but I'll read them first. On the porridge toast video, this is really cool. I find a lot of people treat baking as an unapproachable dark art where they can only follow rigid formulae by rote. So it's cool to have a source to show the process by which a vague idea, when already knowing some basic theory about the process in general, can be iterated upon until a satisfactory product is reached. That's comment one. And then the other comment's on the rice pudding video. I would challenge the convention, propagated by food snobs and the food police, that savoury rice should be light and fluffy. Poppycock, you should eat what you like, as you like it, and when it comes to, say, a chicken curry, I like my rice to be stodgy and sticky. For decades, therefore, I've been buying the cheapest rice I can get, invariably a value or budget brand, invariably long grain, and it doesn't matter if it's something savoury or sweet I'm preparing, I always use the same rice. So there. So kind of related comments here about principles and experts and food snobs and people telling you how you should do your food or how you should enjoy your food. And I mean, I take a balanced approach on this. Experts are experts for a reason. The thing they're saying is expertise. It's often because they've honed that expertise over years. But food is such a subjective thing that there's no right way to do a lot of things. The right way to do food is very often the way you want it to be, the way you like it to be, the way you enjoy it. And so I think it's actually a good thing to try your own methods, to experiment yourself, to make mistakes, to foul up. I've learned more from making mistakes in the kitchen than I have from my successes in the kitchen, I think. And I make a lot of mistakes, and sometimes I make mistakes on purpose, or at least I put myself in a situation where I will make mistakes. The porridge toast video was a case in point. I had this weird dream about something called porridge toast. I deliberately didn't Google it. I deliberately didn't go and see what other people would call porridge toast or porridge bread. I didn't want to contaminate my experimentation with ideas of what it should be. The idea of what it should be was the thing that was in my head, in my dream. And so I think, yeah, I could have just Googled it and found a recipe that works perfectly, and perhaps that would have been the end of it, but it wouldn't have been very interesting, and I wouldn't have learned so much about making bread with oats, about the whole process of making something called porridge toast. I wouldn't have learned those things if I'd just taken somebody else's idea and copied it. That's not to say anything I did was particularly original, but it was original to me at the time of doing it. And so I just think it's a better way of learning, or at least for me it is, to actually just dive in, make mistakes, have a go at doing something yourself. By all means, fall back onto other people's expertise, take advice from experts, listen to people who've done it for years, certainly. But ultimately, like I say, I think I've learned more in the kitchen from screwing up than I have from doing things exactly right by following instructions. And that's not just learning things about technique, that's learning things about my own preferences as well. So yeah, there is no right and wrong way to do certain things. The right way is to do it the way you like it. On to the recent scam baiting Illuminati video now, where the email was sent out to 60 odd people in the to field instead of the CC field. Somebody asked, and it's a good question, did you try to contact the other people that the email went out to? It might be worth doing. I didn't, because I didn't need to. By the time I noticed the email and started scam baiting that scammer, lots of other people were already circulating messages saying this is a scam, or berating the scammer with stronger language than I tend to use. I probably would look to do that if I hadn't seen other people were already circulating that warning. Next comment, you're still doing the shrimp t-shirts? Unfortunately not. I had to close the merch store for a couple of reasons. One, it was just more effort than it was worth, I think. I do get that people appreciated it and people did like it. It wasn't a profit centre for me. I didn't ever run it at a great profit. I just ran it so that people could have some merch related to the channel if they wanted to. The downside of that is that because I set my profit margin really low, on the provider's website that I used, there was a base price which was their cost to make the thing, and then you could set your own margin. So I could have marked it up to twice the base price and made as much money on the thing as notionally they're taking, minus their overheads, of course. So I could have set the price to be anything I wanted. I typically set it at £1 above the base price to keep it reasonable. So I only ever made £1 on any item of merchandise. And I think that's probably disappointing news for some people who bought the merchandise, because I think some people might have bought it to support the channel and it wasn't really supporting the channel. So that's one reason it went, is because it wasn't really supporting the channel. And also, I'm just uncomfortable about taking money from people directly like that. This channel is supported by ad revenue primarily on YouTube, which I know a lot of people don't like ads, and that's a valid point of view, but I don't like holding my hand out for money from viewers. I don't feel comfortable doing it. So that was one reason the merch store went away. The other one is that I kept on getting intellectual property trolls. I kept on getting people taking my products down because they mentioned the word atomic, and apparently that's a trademark owned by some other company. It wasn't atomic, it was atomic shrimp. It's a different phrase. But for me to pursue that case, I'd have had to take them to court, reveal my identity and home address and all sorts of things to somebody who's acting hostile to me. So in the end, I took down the merch store just because it was too much hassle. It was more hassle than it was worth. So, I mean, maybe, now I think about it, maybe what I might do is I might just release the designs for all of that merch so that people can download them for free and add them to their own merch and print their own t-shirt or mug or whatever if they want to. That's just an idea that's coming to my head right now, so I will think about that a bit more before I actually do it. On the fizzies and Mr. Potato, I like Mr. Potato's sombrero. Yeah, but maybe he's hiding something. For example, on this other Pringles knockoff product, Mr. Yum has just letters in place of eyes and nose. On the drink can tin work revisited video, really good question. A lot of people asked this question or one like it. Would it help to anneal the aluminium first? So annealing metal usually consists of heating it up and either cooling it slowly or in some cases cooling it rapidly. And that causes the crystal structure of the metal to change in a way that usually makes the metal softer. In fact, when it's annealing, it's always making it softer. So if you anneal aluminium, you can make it very, very ductile and malleable for a while. And then when you hammer it or whatever else, you end up work hardening it because you're changing the structure by impacting it or stretching it or bending it. So annealing is like the opposite of metal fatigue, if you like. So would it help to anneal the aluminium for the drink can tin work? It would, except there are two reasons why you probably can't do that. Maybe three. Firstly, the annealing temperature for aluminium is between 300 and 400 Celsius. So that's hotter than my oven goes. That's something you could probably only achieve over, say, a gas flame or something like that, or by torching it. That's a problem. Problem number two, in that it's such thin metal that if you try to torch it, you quite often either melt it or just set light to it. Metals do burn in air, especially very thin pieces of metal will actually combust in normal air. So if you try to torch the aluminium, you'll probably burn it, or at least melt it, or warp it. So it's very difficult to anneal a very, very thin piece of aluminium, such as you get from a drink can, by torching it. And the third problem is that the cans are coated on the inside. Most drink cans are coated on the inside with a sprayed layer of epoxy plastic to stop the contents of the can, which might be acidic, from corroding the metal of the can, which is often not impervious to acids. So they spray a plastic coating on the inside of the can. It's usually epoxy, I think, and the fail temperature of epoxy is normally somewhere between like 150 and 250 Celsius. So even if you had an oven, say a kiln or something, that would go up to the anneal temperature for aluminium, and you could anneal it without melting it, the epoxy coating on the can would burn and would probably make an awful mess. So it's probably just not a thing to try to do. So the way to work around the work hardening of the metal is just to make sure that every bend you make is your final bend. So you don't bend something and then bend it back and then bend it again. It will snap. So you just organize your workflow so that every bend you make is the last bend you make for that part of the metal. So you bend it into final position. And finally, a question, very serious question, on the 100% apple pie. This is an apple pie that I made from 100% apple. So it was stewed, rehydrated apple filling, which had been rehydrated with apple juice, made with a crust made from apple powder, rehydrated with apple juice. So everything in the pie was apple. And the question is, hey, what should I replace the apple with if I made this? I love the idea, but I'm not a big apple fan. Do you have any good substitutes? Well, there's good news. The good news is you can just leave the apples out. Nothing will happen. Anyway, that's everything for this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.